Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Holly Grand, and I'm going to be facilitating our webinar tonight. I just want to go over a few reminders before we get started. Your cameras, microphones, and chat are all going to be disabled during the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature that's located on the bottom of your screen. We are going to be answering all questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to type your questions in at any point during the presentation. If you want to provide public comment about the proposed mariculture site that we're talking about this evening, you must email that to oyster.mariculture@tpwd.texas.gov. We will not be taking comments through Zoom tonight. You are going to be receiving an email follow-up email, from Zoom tomorrow. That email is going to have that email address, our Oyster Mariculture email address, a link to our Texas Parks and Wildlife Department Education YouTube channel, where you'll be able to find a recording of this webinar, and I believe a link to our Oyster Mariculture website as well. I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our presenter for the evening, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Hi, I'm Lindsay Campbell, and I'm going to do the presentation tonight, but also on the meeting, if there are questions later, we have Leslie Hartman, the ecosystem lead for the Matagorda Bay ecosystem, and Karen Utley, who is the biologist there. So tonight we're here for the public hearing for proposed site G-0011, and that's just a sequential order as the applications are received, processed, and come to public meeting. This is a grow out facility in Matagorda Bay. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide information about the proposed cultivated oyster mariculture grow-out facility in Matagorda Bay, answer questions about the facility, and give instructions on how to submit public comment. Just quickly, some background on cultivated oyster mariculture. Texas Parks and Wildlife permits the activity of cultivated oyster mariculture. Sometimes I will shorten that to CALM. You may hear me say that, at grow-out sites where oysters are grown to a size for harvest and consumption, and at nursery hatchery facilities where oyster seed is produced and grown up. These are all off-bottom mariculture sites. The applicants nominate their own sites and conduct a natural resource survey. And the permit has a 10-year term. Only eastern oysters from Texas broodstock are allowed in this mariculture. Some common gear types that you will likely see in Texas are floating cages, so larger cages that have bags in them and large pontoon floats. In this photo, the oysters are in what they call the drying position, where they're desiccating out of the water, and then the feeding position, where the oysters are down in the water and the pontoons are on top. Within those, and a different type of system, are floating bags. So the floating bags, instead of slightly smaller bags that are in larger cages, floating bags are individual bags that also have pontoons that again can be flipped to the desiccation drying position and the down in the water feeding position. Another type of system is the adjustable long line system, where there are baskets strung on lines between poles, and there are different positions on those poles at the different water levels where the lines are moved up and down. An annual fee is paid for the permit, and it's based on the size of the grow out or nursery hatchery site. The applicants and permit holders must also get authorizations from other agencies, such as the Texas General Land Office, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the U.S. Coast Guard. We do require an active use criteria that which is a required stocking of seed per year, 100,000 seed per acre per year. Year-round harvest is allowed from these facilities. However, the harvest must comply with all Texas Department of Health Service regulations. Proposed site G-0011 is again an oyster grow out facility located in Matagorda Bay, that's shellfish harvest area TX15, which are approved waters, and is 2 acres. Here is a vicinity map. So again, in Matagorda County, Matagorda Bay, and then over on the not East Matagorda Bay, but on the east side of Matagorda Bay. The proposed access route are from the Palacios Harbor and along the bay there, or potentially an access point, a local access point. The gear type proposed for use are floating cages with 8 rows of lines in 3 columns. They will be anchored with double helix anchors and use stainless steel, half-inch stainless steel coated line for their main lines. Orange PVC buoys will be affixed to each anchor point, floating above each anchor point. And navigational markers per U.S. Coast Guard requirements will be installed at the corner points and other requirements if asked from Coast Guard. Bird deterrents used if needed, ticklers on gear, and those are like in this picture down here, commonly used like large zip ties or other structures that stick up off the gear, creating kind of a spike surface that so birds don't want to land on it. And also the bird away hawk system, however, not be using that during the period of November 1st through April 30th, which is the whooping crane nesting season. Here's an overhead view of that site layout where you see your 8 rows, so 8 lines, 12 to 15 cages on a line, and then in 3 columns. And these orange dots here represent the buoys that are over each anchor point. A cross-sectional or side-sectional view is you will have your anchor point, the buoy, and your main line with your cages. We did ask for clarification that this line, while in this picture, is depicted as somewhat bowed. The lines will be kept taut, so there will not be slack in these lines. They will be kept taut to prevent entanglement. On-site operations will be at twice a week at a minimum, access via boat. The floating cage system will be flipped for desiccation, and oysters will be resubmerged for a minimum of 14 days prior to harvest per shellfish sanitation regulations. Gear will be taken onshore to their operations point for cleaning and repair. Oysters will be tumbled and sorted as needed on site on a vessel or on land. All gear will be tagged with a aqua tag with their permit number and ways to reach you if the gear comes loose and someone was to find it. The hurricane plan is a 5-stage approach of levels of preparedness, including the final stage, stage 5, would be post-storm recovery. Prior to the storms, they will practice sinking their cages, keeping up-to-date inventory, inspecting the farm, and keeping gear in good repair. They will monitor weather reports and the cone of uncertainty of any storms in the Gulf, and then of course as they go closer to Texas, and sink cages if needed. Post-storm recovery would include refloating cages, inventory, and reporting any missing gear. As part of the application, the Natural Resource Survey, they elected to use side scan sonar combined with sediment samples. So when you have side scan sonar, sediment sample ground truthing is only in the site itself and the 200-foot buffer. However, after review, the Parks and Wildlife Review Committee asked for some additional samples in that 200 to 500 foot buffer, which are depicted here in green, just to make sure we're covering all areas. And there were some indications in side scan that we wanted to ground truth to make sure that they weren't oyster habitat. The side scan was conducted on October 25th in 2022, and sediment samples were collected with a 15-pound stainless steel dredge grab sampler. An example of one is here in this picture. Those were collected on September 17th of 2022. After Parks and Wildlife requested additional samples, those sediment samples were collected on January 22nd of 2023. All sample compositions were mud or mud and shell hash, but not enough shell or the type of shell to indicate viable oyster habitat. And the depth range for the site and samples were 7 to 8 feet. The next steps for this application will be the 2-week public comment period, which will be open until March the 22nd. Public comment is submitted through the Oyster Mariculture email at oyster.mariculture@tpwd.texas.gov, and any consideration will be given to public comments submitted. If all of that goes well, a conditional permit is issued. This conditional permit does not allow the applicants to begin mariculture activity. This is just when they take that and go to the other agencies to get their other authorizations. The other agencies, as TPWD is the lead on this, need to see that conditional permit before they consider for their other authorizations. A conditional permit does not guarantee that you will receive other authorizations. It is just the first step you have to take before applying those. After all those other authorizations are received and proof shown to TPWD and we review those other authorizations, a final permit is authorized and issued after the first year's annual fee is received. At that point, mariculture activity can begin. So again, I will put up the email address where public comment can be submitted. The deadline again is the 22nd of March. And for more information, please visit the Texas Parks and Wildlife website. And if you search in the search bar Oyster Mariculture, it will bring up the Mariculture page. Along the sidebar of that page, there are links to a GIS viewer where you can see pending, conditional and fully permitted mariculture sites and find more information there. There will also be a link to this recording at that site. So at this time, we'll go ahead and open to any questions that you may have. You will type that in along your viewing bottom. You should see a little Q&A bubble. Click on that and you can type in any questions. So I'll pause and wait a moment for any questions. Okay, I am not seeing any questions now. Again, if you later have questions, you're watching this video later or have questions later or public comment later, you can email the oyster.mariculture email at TPWD. And I just want to thank you all for being here or for watching this later. I will hand this back over to Holly unless Leslie or Karen, you have any things that I may not have covered or need to clarify.
So it looks like I'll hop in and wrap this up here. Thank you all again so much for joining us this evening, and to all of our Parks and Wildlife staff for being on the webinar as well. Like I said earlier, you will be receiving an email from Zoom tomorrow with a ton of information in it. So please hold on to that. If you're watching the recording later, all of that information is going to be in the description of the video as well. So again, thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you, everyone.